Hello, I am your Kinesthetically interactive story ancillary, also known as KISA. Accessing story record White Horse, Red Horse, Black Horse, Dead Horse, now available on paperback, Amazon Kindle, and Barnes & Noble Nook. Loading storytelling persona. Please stand by. The thing about endings is that people all too often never even realize there was a beginning. Everyone always notices the beginnings when it's something obvious like a creation or an invention, but the quieter, subtler beginnings which set an ending in motion are almost always missed or even ignored. When the end of Earth itself finally arrives, the living won't even think to wonder where the apocalypse began until it's all over. And once it's over, the majority of those formerly living will most likely spend eternity contemplating more obvious things, such as the nature of eternity. Not everyone will be unaware of the beginning of the end. Plenty of beings have been extremely well informed about impending events, both seen and unseen. But unfortunately, humans tend to only realize and understand things when they have their hands in them. Elijah Blanco was no different. He only knew and still knows how the biggest ending began because after he died, he was pulled into a race to the finish line, the very last finish line for Earth's current run. Elijah's life hadn't been a terribly long one, and it certainly hadn't been a very pleasant one. In fact, Elijah was actually relieved when he was informed he was to be executed for his crimes. One could assume this was because he was a godly man and believed something better awaited him after death, but one would be very mistaken. The truth was, Elijah was sick of the whole business of life in general. People told him he was supposed to enjoy his time on Earth, but every time he tried, he found out people really didn't like his methods. So, after 33 years of being shot at, chased, cursed, and other unpleasant things which finally culminated in a hanging sentence, he was simply glad it was all coming to an end. Of course, the people who were hanging him couldn't even let him have a quick and easy death. Apparently, the end of a wanted criminal had to be a grand ceremonial event, complete with being marched to a poorly made gallows in the center of town. Elijah wasn't convinced the execution site could do what it was built for, but his judge and jury crowd of escorts assured him it hadn't let them down yet. "Your rope ain't even thick enough to hang cats with," Elijah insisted with a disappointed frown as he surveyed the gallows. "You're gonna have a hell of a problem when I drop to the ground and get back up, 'cause when that happens, I'll be coming for all of ya." Elijah's wish that his snide comments would piss people off and get things moving faster was fulfilled pretty quickly. He was promptly dragged to the platform, silently thankful he wouldn't have to put up with anything at all much longer. He was more than ready to embrace oblivion. Unfortunately for Elijah, after his neck snapped and his brainwaves stopped, he didn't find oblivion. He didn't find heaven. He didn't find hell. And he didn't find himself suddenly a worm, as someone had once warned him would be his fate. No, instead Elijah found himself sitting on his horse in a very large, empty, black space. He stared around for a while, baffled, then finally looked down at his dapple-gray mare, who looked back towards him and seemed just as confused. "Wait, did they kill you too?" Elijah demanded of the horse angrily. "That's their idea of justice? I don't recall you shooting a man in cold blood, filthy bastards." The horse didn't seem terribly bothered by it, but Elijah was still livid. Delilah was a wonderful and loyal little Mustang, and she deserved better than being slaughtered by a mob of angry idiots. Elijah was so insulted on Delilah's behalf that he honestly would have sat and fumed for a good while longer. But then Delilah's ears pricked up, and she looked out intently at something. Elijah looked out in the same direction to see what she found so interesting, and he saw a twinkle like a distant star. Elijah watched in silence for a moment, then looked down at Delilah again. She swiveled one ear back in his direction, but kept looking ahead. With a shrug, Elijah had Delilah walk on towards the starlight. He wasn't certain how being dead worked yet, but he imagined sitting and staring at lights in the distance didn't get a person very far. The starlight turned out to be a petite woman on a strange white horse. She wore a figure-fitted bodysuit made of white fabric embedded with crystals and tiny bulbs of light. How it worked and why she would wear something like that was far beyond Elijah. A matching wide-brimmed hat rested on the woman's head and kept Elijah from seeing any of her face at first, but then the woman tilted her head back and peered at him with hazel eyes. Despite her strange outfit, she looked like she could have been from one of the Italian-American families from back home. Lips painted a deep red pursed, and then opened so the woman could say, Didn't think I'd see a cowboy first thing in hell. Didn't think demons wore lights in their clothes, Elijah shot back. He was hardly a cowboy, but he had lived in Western America in the late 1800s, and he had a thing for the color black. He thought it was dramatic. Little did he realize, all it did was remind the woman of the villains in ancient American Old West films she'd seen on archival internet sites. Although the woman's getup was strange to Elijah, the sparkling lights and ridiculous hat were nothing compared to the horse the woman was sitting on. At first glance, Elijah thought it was wearing armor, but that wasn't it at all. The horse itself was made out of some sort of jointed metal, which was painted white. Its mane and tail were comprised of metallic threads which were pliable enough to move when the horse did. As if all of that wasn't enough, the horse's eyes glowed a deep blue, and when the horse snorted, wisps of steam curled from its nostrils. While Elijah tried to wrap his head around the mechanical horse, the woman smiled slightly and asked him, "What's your name?" "Elijah Blanco," Elijah replied, looking back up to the stranger's face. The fact she looked and sounded American somehow only added to her weirdness. How could someone from his home have a horse like that? Had he missed some amazing breakthrough invention during his time on the run? "What about you?" "Kinesthetically," the woman said. "Are you dead?" "That's a hell of a question to ask someone you just met," Elijah pointed out with a raised eyebrow. "It's a fair question to ask if the person asking it has just died," Caprice countered. She shifted on her horse to take a more relaxed position, and rested one hand on her hip. "How about I rephrase it?" she offered evenly. "Hello, my name is Kinesthetically, and I believe I'm dead. Are you dead as well?" "Yeah, I'm dead," Elijah admitted. He crossed his arms over the horn of his saddle and rested on them to give Caprice the same air of carelessness she was giving him. "No idea where this place is supposed to be, though, so don't bother asking." "Noted," Caprice said with a smirk. She looked around, patting her horse's neck idly. The metal steed shook its head and shifted its weight restlessly, but stayed where it was, watching Elijah and Delilah. "So, what the hell's that thing?" Elijah decided to come out and ask. "Weirdest damn horse I've ever seen." "Exactly what it looks like," Caprice replied easily, "an artificial horse." "What the hell for?" Elijah pressed. "How'd you even get it?" "I bought him," Caprice said airily. It was pretty clear she wouldn't be terribly helpful if it didn't suit her. He's run by an artificial intelligence. Elijah stared at her blankly. The nice thing about death, Elijah would learn, was it lifted the barrier of language and dialects, not just those established by region and culture, but by time as well. Communication became universal, as it always should have been. Unfortunately, it didn't give a person an instant upload of knowledge concerning everything in their world's history and future. So even though Caprice could speak Greek and be understood by the man in black, talking about things not of Elijah's time was like speaking Greek he still couldn't understand. "His name is Shu," Caprice went on. She was apparently going to pretend Elijah wasn't staring at her like she had snakes coming out of her ears. "After the ancient Egyptian god who held up the sky goddess Nut." "So you're a goddess?" Elijah asked dryly. "To some," Caprice replied with another smirk. She seemed to be great at that. "What's your horse's name?" "Delilah," Elijah said, though he was seriously considering riding away. This woman seemed like she could possibly be bad news. Sirens generally were in his experience, and women as beautiful and well-spoken as Caprice were generally sirens. Though that was again in his experience. "Delilah," Caprice repeated with a tilt of her head. "Are you worried she'll betray you?" "Hasn't yet," Elijah replied flatly. "Can't say the same about human women." Caprice laughed and Elijah looked around. Was this all there was to death? Being in a black expanse with nothing but a horse and random strangers? He knew a few preachers who were in for a big shock. A soft, hazy glow in the distance caught Elijah's attention. It seemed to be coming from a horizon he hadn't been able to see before. He frowned and squinted at the light, trying to see if it was another person. "What's that?" he muttered. Caprice followed his gaze to the glow and lifted the brim of her hat a little so she could see more clearly. "I can't tell," she said. She looked at Elijah and jerked her head in that direction. "Let's go see." Caprice signaled to her horse to get moving, and the robotic beast took off with thundering hoofbeats. He certainly went a lot faster than Elijah would have expected. Delilah apparently didn't mind a little race one bit because she sprang after Shu energetically and didn't waste any time catching up. The two horses and their riders raced on for the glow in the distance, which grew as they got closer, but still didn't reveal exactly what it was coming from. It wasn't until the four of them were completely immersed in the light that everything cleared and they found themselves in a massive ivory chamber, and not on their own. An impressive crowd of riders had gathered there, though not all of them sat on horses, whether artificial or otherwise. There were people on camels, donkeys, mules, elephants, and even bicycles and machines Elijah had never seen before. As Elijah looked around, he spotted multiple people who looked as though they had ridden straight out of history books. That was when it suddenly hit him why Caprice and so many others wore such strange outfits, and rode creatures and things he'd never even dreamed of. They all came from different times. The people there had been collected from every point in Earth's history, ranging over what looked like thousands and thousands of years. The entire group stood there in confusion for a while, looking at one another and wondering exactly what it was they were supposed to be doing. Then there was a deafening crack, and a hole opened in the fabric of space itself in front of the crowd. At first there wasn't anything to see through the hole except empty darkness, but then a towering male figure stepped out. He was extremely tall and covered in armor of metal which glowed gold and made him look rather alien. Elijah found he somehow knew the figure was an angel, though he didn't know what made him so sure. The man certainly didn't look like any angel Elijah had ever imagined. As the angel entered the chamber, those closest to him warily backed away. A tense silence followed, and then the angel lifted his hand and slammed it into the darkness behind him, causing a loud thunderclap. Elijah figured it was probably a good thing everyone there was no longer living, because it looked like some of them would have dropped dead out of terror right then and there. "You have been brought here," the angel said in a powerful voice, "to make a choice." Elijah wondered if he was the only one under the impression this angel had been excited about the destruction of sinners for quite some time. The way he loomed over the riders and watched them through the glowing slits in his helmet didn't exactly make for a comforting presence. Weren't angels supposed to be reassuring? "You have also been brought here," the angel went on, "to compete for a chance to win back God's favor." Elijah lifted an eyebrow and glanced at Caprice. The way she looked back at him told Elijah he wasn't alone in wondering why he should care about God's opinion when God never cared about his. "You have all lived your lives in sin, chasing after worldly pursuits with no regard for your soul's final destination," the angel said gravely. "You ignored the warnings of hellfire and eternal separation from your Creator and chose to indulge in the makings of your own self-destruction." The angel paused there and stared at the humans, who were all watching him intently. Finally, the angel concluded, "And that is why you will be perfect." "Perfect for what?" asked a tall and proud man with leathery skin and sharp eyes. His large sorrel horse bobbed her head gently as if seconding the question. Elijah wondered if the man was a Roman soldier. He was certainly dressed like one. "The time has come to elect the 4 horsemen of the apocalypse," the angel explained. "This is how those positions will be assigned." "I don't remember that part in the book of Revelations, do you?" Caprice asked Elijah. "Didn't really make a habit of reading any of the Bible," Elijah replied flatly. Though that being said, he couldn't deny the angel had him interested. Not in the chance of winning God over, but in becoming a horseman of the apocalypse. What the hell did that even mean? "You must all prove your worthiness by hunting and capturing one target for every sin you committed over the course of your lives," the angel continued, ignoring the quiet commentaries. "The 4 horsemen who first achieved this goal—" "Excuse me, shouldn't that be horse people?" Caprice interjected. The angel stopped and looked at her, and so did the rest of the crowd. Elijah just hoped to hell he wasn't close enough to get singed by any fire and brimstone about to get shot her way. "It isn't gender-specific," said a lean male rider with dark skin, perched on what Elijah would later learn to be a motorcycle. He sounded English to Elijah, though Elijah had never seen an Englishman all dressed up in black leather and denim. "They say it like that all the time in the Bible, don't they?" the rider went on. His dark brown eyes were scrunched up in subdued amusement at Caprice's little protest. At least someone found her funny, Elijah thought. "If that's the case, it seems lazy to me to not just fix the wording," Caprice said with a shrug, "assuming it's not actually thinly veiled sexism, but try telling any of that to the church." "Out of curiosity, have you ever actually been in one?" Elijah asked her. "Is that how you died? You stepped into one and burst into flames?" The look he got from Caprice in reply was almost impressively nasty. "Are we honestly having a debate about political correctness in the afterlife in front of an angel?" a woman asked incredulously from her steam-powered camel. She was richly dressed in fine silks and jewels, but her grand appearance and sour expression didn't put Caprice off one bit. "He's got all of eternity to finish his explanation," Caprice pointed out. "He's got time to address an equal rights issue." Elijah pinched the bridge of his nose. Honestly, the neck snapping had been far more pleasant than what he was being subjected to right then. "Fine," the angel said. Nearly everyone was rather surprised to note that he didn't sound terribly irritated or even inconvenienced. "The 4-horse people who first achieve the stated goal will be given the opportunity to capture one of the 4 ends, which will in turn determine the horse person's eternal designation." Caprice gave an approving nod. There was quite a bit of eye-rolling from the group, but no one said anything. Elijah had to assume it was out of fear that Caprice would talk some more if they did. "Those who do not wish to participate may depart now," the angel announced. After a pause, the crowd looked at one another briefly before looking back to the angel. "No offense," said a pale man riding an Appaloosa, "but that's not a tough choice." The rest of the group nodded, staying right where they were. The angel nodded slowly and said, "In that case." He trailed off and lifted his left hand. A panel of light appeared in the air below the angel's hand, and he began gently sweeping his fingers over the surface of the panel. Elijah had no idea what the hell he was witnessing, but when he glanced over at Caprice, he could tell it was no great mystery to her. Several other riders apparently recognized the angel's action as well, but Elijah took comfort in noticing there were plenty of people who looked just as confused as he felt. The angel tapped the panel then, and a moving picture made of light sprang to life above the gathered crowd. It was a herd of wild ponies who reared, bucked, and shrieked like possessed things. Their eyes flashed like lightning, and they snorted fire as they bared their teeth fiercely at one another. "Are they what we're supposed to catch?" a dubious voice asked. "Yes," the angel replied. "This herd is about to be released onto the earth and the plains beyond. You will pursue them and capture them as you are able. We will keep the score." "Now that ain't fair," Elijah snapped. "What do you mean you'll keep the score? How do we know you won't be pulling for your favorite and doing them favors behind our backs?" "We have nothing to gain or lose by the success of any one of you," the angel said evenly. "You have lived your lives being ranked and classed by one another, but to us, you are all simply humans." "Well, that's nice," someone muttered. The angel either didn't hear it or didn't care. "You will each be provided with a length of heaven's rope," the angel said. "Subdue your intended pony, and it will be transported to your keep." "What, you mean a corral?" a cowboy with a white hat asked with a puzzled frown. "Yes," the angel replied, still not appearing bothered by any of the interruptions. "You may inquire of this keep, or corral, in your mind and hear your quarry's total at any time." "This is sounding more and more like a video game," Caprice remarked to Elijah. He gave her a blank stare in response. "Sounded like a what?" "There are things you must learn on your own," the angel informed the riders somberly. "You have passed beyond time's realm, but do not think you are beyond peril." He took a step back, obviously preparing to leave. "Go with blessings." "So wait, you're just chucking us out like this?" a short man on a pony asked in surprise. "That hardly seems fair." "To borrow the words of another place in a time beyond yours," the angel replied directly to the man, "deal with it." With that, the angel vanished in a flash of fiery orange light, leaving the dead riders blinking in stunned silence.